ever have one of those moments where you suddenly remember a plot point or character detail? Something that's been seemingly dropped and you just wonder, whatever happened to that? In superhero comics, which tend to have long-running narratives, that can happen with a fair bit of frequency. Not only do you have long-running histories and storylines, but fans dipping in and out. So it's natural that there are questions, and that leads us to today's, which is, whatever happened to the Three Jokers? The Three Jokers was more than just a Black Label book. It was a plot that was seeded in the mainline continuity, made it through several light reboots, and for a while was floating in an, okay, but what does that mean space? Is it canon? Is it not canon? What's going on with it? People had questions. The story of how it came about is just as fascinating as how it's ended up, because there is time of recording an answer for now. So for those who haven't been keeping up, missed it entirely, or just wanted to catch up or talk about it again, we're going to discuss the Three Jokers and what happened to them. How are they? Why are they? When are they? I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and let's chat the Three Jokers. Batman the Three Jokers was written by Geoff with art by Jason Fabok and Brad Anderson. It was released from August to October through 2020 and consisted of 3 issues. However, as mentioned, the concept was seeded inside the mainline universe, this in the New 52. This will come to matter, as this story has some questions as to its canonicity. Even between the creators, you can get some different answers. So this idea of Three Jokers is first mentioned during the Darkseid War, which was the event at the tail end of the New 52. It was part of wrapping it up and leading into DC Rebirth, which was a soft reboot. It didn't undo a lot of the New 52 continuity, but it did change some things. The Darkseid War storyline ran from 2015 to 2016, and it featured one of my favorite arcs, Bruce Wayne refusing to get out of the Mobius chair. He even declares it in Justice League 47, this from the run that began in 2011 with the start of the New 52.
I'm never leaving this chair.
And this follow-up panel with Hal sitting beside him in a construct chair complete with construct chips, wonderful. Does it have anything to do with the Three Jokers? Not directly, but I will never pass up a chance to mention it. What does pertain to the Three Jokers directly is issue number 42, when Batman sits in the chair for the first time. In this issue, which has the same creative team as the Three Jokers will years later, Batman asks the chair a question because the chair is supposed to know all. He even declares himself the god of knowledge, but first he has to test it, you know, to prove that it knows what it's talking about. So first he asks it a basic warm-up tester question. Who killed his parents? And it gets that right. Joe Chill. And then he asks a follow-up question about the Joker. What is the Joker's true name? And then we get a Luke Skywalker, that's not true, it's impossible style reaction. And for a while, it was a mystery. What had he seen? What had he been told? It weighed upon him, but obviously at that point, it wasn't the focus of the arc. The answer to what the chair had told him came in Justice League number 50. This story was entitled Darkseid War Conclusion, Death and Rebirth, which again had the same creative team as the Three Jokers. After everything had settled, Hal goes to see Bruce in the Batcave. He had to yank him out of the chair. He did get out of the chair, but not by choice. The New 52 had shifted the dynamic between these two, whereas in the post-Hal Rebirth era, which was Hal coming back to life, it had been more antagonistic and then moved into a grudging respect space. The New 52 flipped their dynamic, and they were much friendlier with each other, especially on Hal's part. Hal learns Bruce's identity before Clark in the New 52 timeline. So this dynamic of him revealing his concerns to Hal fits well for them in this time. Bruce wants to make sure you're okay.
I'm fine, though I was wrong.
About what?
The Ring isn't the hero.
Forget about that. Tell me about him. I heard you ask the chair what's the Joker's real name. I heard it answer you, and I heard you say that's impossible. Why?
It doesn't matter.
It does, Bruce. Did it give you a name? Someone you know?
It didn't give me a name.
Then what did it say?
It said there were 3.
3? 3 Jokers? What the hell does that mean?
I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out.
That's be the tagline for this entire Three Joker era. I don't know yet. Even though at the time, in all fairness, they did seem to have a direction, but it would end up getting derailed. Readers would have to wait to find out the answer to this till 2020, but they weren't initially supposed to. It was supposed to come out before that. Geoff Johns' Doomsday Clock was meant to tighten up a lot of this newly emerging continuity, but things changed. There were delays, new status quo. The creative direction for DC shifted. People got fired and moved around internally. And so when the Three Jokers emerged, it was into a very different world than the one it was meant to. So with all that preamble, just what was the Three Jokers? We covered Three Jokers on this channel when it first arrived back in 2020, and in it there was, as the title promised, literally 3 Jokers. The Criminal, a version closer to the Golden Age Joker, recreating the frown and stance he was seen in during the era back in the 40s. There was also the Clown, who had a bit more of an awkward job. He had a bit more spaces to fill, because this Joker is meant to embody both the Silver and the Bronze Age, and there's a difference between the two, even though the Joker wasn't very heavily utilized inside of the Silver Age. He'd been kinda shelved, but would pop up a little bit here here and there, but then also have a resurgence in popularity because of the 66 TV series. So in this comic, he's depicted as fairly goofy and a bit campy, but at the same time, since he is also the Bronze Era Joker, that's the Joker that killed Jason Todd. Or it seems to be. The story plays around a bit with this because both the clown and comedian have lines claiming it, but it leans more clown. Some of the confusion is intentional. It's meant to throw both the reader and characters a bit off balance. The Bronze Age Joker is straddling a line of still having jokes and being funny, but also murderous. And yet, the murder of Jason Todd is considered to be one of the more heinous acts committed by the Joker, which feels like it could run into the territory of the last Joker they show here, that being the comedian. So this second Joker feels a bit less well-defined. Now the comedian, he's meant to be the crueler, more sadistic, nihilistic one. And so you can see why that also encompasses Jason Todd. This is the Killing Joke Joker, though at points he's also a bit implied to be Snyder's Joker. You see, the thing with breaking things down like this is that there would be more than 3. This story involved Batman, Bruce Wayne, Jason Todd, Red Hood, and Barbara Gordon, Batgirl, having to deal with these various Jokers. The 3 Jokers in this were working together, all while Batman was trying to solve the mystery of who was the original Joker and why they seemed to be trying to create some new Joker. He felt that the first Joker had created the other 2. In this story, it was implied that the comedian or modern Joker was the true, in quotes, Joker. But it could be up for debate, but it slants very heavily that way by the end, even though it then says that it doesn't matter. In this story, the 3 Jokers are trying to kidnap Joe Chill to make him the 4th Joker, an ultimate Joker who would have to push Batman to the edge and see whether he could forgive or not, which is one of the things they say is a theme of this book. And by they, I mean the creators. Other things were revealed in this story, like the Joker's wife and child from the Killing Joke being alive, Jason loving Barbara, and he left her a note that fell off the door, so she never got it, and maybe it was the Joker who swept it up, so let's never speak of this again. And Batman forgave Joe Chill. This story was beautifully illustrated and had some interesting character work, but on the whole, while an interesting Joker story, it was also at times a tad self-indulgent, and pushed its concept to breaking in certain moments. A concept not all were on board with. It was definitely intriguing, but part of what helped it feel more solid was how self-contained it was. When attached to the rest of canon, it became more murky, as some of the threads it put in play didn't work so well with the DC universe at that point, or in general for some characters. I see you, Jason and Barbara. You cannot be, for they have decided that Barbara and Dick are endgame. But the question is, was the story meant to be canon? Well, for that, we have a couple of answers. Geoff Johns stated in 2020 during DC's virtual fandom event, because COVID, I've never really told a Batman story. I've done Batman Earth 1, but that's a different, younger, low-tech version. This was the first time I had a chance to write a real Batman story in continuity with the Joker. It's not a parallel Earth story. These 3 Jokers are not from different Earths. We tried to make it as grounded and personal as possible. This was in response to whether or not this was an out-of-continuity story or was pulling Jokers from different universes. These questions were being asked not just because of the premise, but also because it was being published through DC Black Label, which was/is an imprint printing mature prestige format style books, founded in 2018. The thing was/is, most of them are outside of continuity. If not necessarily explicitly, it oftentimes appears so based on the contents. The idea behind it was that things could be loosely attached, and then if they did well, they could be pulled into the main universe, which is how artist Jason Fabok described the series in a post on Twitter/X/Hell in 2019. It's in continuity like Killing Joke is. You can take it or leave it. We are going to introduce some pretty gutsy stuff in Jokers that's never been done before, so the fans can react to it and they can decide if they want it part of main continuity or not, like Killing Joke. So that was where the 3 Jokers itself stood in 2020, but it still left some unanswered questions. And it was a bit loose in some details about timelines and the like, which is part of why that story fares better kept outside of continuity. And yet this 3 Jokers concept would find itself resolved inside of the mainline continuity in 2024. But how did that happen? To understand this, one must track the 3 Jokers concept a tad further. According to industry scuttlebutt, so take some grains of salt with this, there was supposed to be a sequel to 3 Jokers, and this is something that Johns and Anderson and Fabok have discussed a little bit on social media. It was supposedly supposed to be called Batman Universe, but it never came to fruition. Some say it's because the creators never heard back about their pitch. Others that things just moved on in different directions. It already took so long to get 3 Jokers out there in the first place, and the continuity was changing, moving, things were just different from when it was first set to be released. Johns eventually ended up at DC going back to Golden Age and JSA things, and him and Fabok went on to co-found along with several others, and hence become exclusive with their new imprint, Ghost Machine, which will publish through Image Comics. This company was founded in October 2023, though of course there's probably some clauses where they can finish off stuff that they're working on. We'll see how long the exclusivity remains. Time of recording for everything. Speaking of time of recording, it appears that whatever direction the plot was initially going to go in, those avenues may be closed. But the question still popped up. Even as of 2023, people were still asking, what is going on with the three Jokers? And there's a reason for that. It came back up in mainline continuity. Now, sometimes certain events in canon end up memory hole, just pushed to the side or not spoken of. And while some fans will always clamor for answers, that isn't always the worst approach, especially if one has no answers to give at that moment or stories to tell. But DC kept bringing this one back up. When Chip Zdarsky took over Batman with issue 125 in 2022, that very issue had a three Joker panel in a nightmare sequence right near the beginning of the book, so bringing it right back into readers' consciousness. Also, which Joker is Steve Jobs' Joker? Nice turtleneck, Mr. J. This was not accidental, and there would be little references throughout the run, people poking Batman about the three Jokers. This is because pretty much everything that was brought up at the start of Zdarsky's run is still in play in 2024, time of recording. So this three Joker plot was resolved, seemingly put to bed. The mystery was solved. How are there three Jokers? Well, there aren't. But there are. Let me explain. Psychological manipulation is a huge part of this run, particularly dealing with the idea of creating alters or locked personalities, backup personalities. The focus at the start was on Batman of Zur-En-Arrh, but that would expand, and the history of Zur-En-Arrh would change. There's some retconning that's going on here. And now we need to enter Batman 143. This is part of the Joker Year 1 storyline, part 2 to be exact, and it's also part of an AI art controversy, but that's not what we need for our purposes. For our purposes, we need the explanation that's given to the Joker, his backstory, more backstory. In this issue, there's the reveal that Daniel Captio, a psychologist who had also trained Batman, had trained the Joker. You may be thinking, we have Professor Hugo Strange at home. And this does indeed sound like a plot that could be attributed to him. It seems like the reason it's not is because one would have to twist his history to make it so that he knew Batman far earlier, and also because this character is an original creation of Chip Zdarsky, created back in Batman the Night #8 in 2022. They add a tad more to him. They refer to him as a nomadic academic, so this character is said to have trained and known Bruce from when he was young, and at that moment seen the potential for alternate personalities. But still, this does feel largely like a Hugo Strange plot. But instead, we have this. Behold, I'm a scientist of human behavior. Batman wrongly thinks he can be a force for order. I'm interested in what happens when he meets an equal force for chaos. The darkness behind his eyes is eerily similar to Bruce's, a deep force driving both of them. The writer, that's just me being salty, he exceeds Bruce immediately, seeing the potential of the backups. The first is the clown, laughter and devilishness bursting forth. An imp with a demon inside. The second is simply that demon. I don't believe in heaven or hell, but if I did, I think this man has existed for millennia, tormenting humanity in service of something greater. The third is calm like a black ocean at night, and like that ocean, all that waits for you is cold death. So there it is, three Jokers, alternate personalities of the main Joker. So I guess four Jokers, which lines up. There were going to be 4 Jokers in that 3 Joker story if they had succeeded in transforming Joe Chill. So the core idea is maintained. There are not 3 physical Jokers, but instead there are backups. This is a bit of a redux, an idea that has floated around out there for quite some time. There are things that the Joker has said along the lines of, if I have to have a backstory, make it multiple choice. There's this concept that the reason the Joker is so different throughout the eras, to reconcile that, is that because he's so unstable, it means that he can't maintain a single personality. So this is taking that and twisting it, tweaking it, playing with the idea of alters. For many, why the Joker was so different over the decades wasn't a question they necessarily needed answered inside of canon itself. It was more of a metatextual question that was fun to discuss in fandom or outside of it, potentially with creators, but not something that the books themselves needed to answer for all fans. I'm sure some wanted it, but not everybody. This was potentially one of those questions that could have been left alone. But since 3 Jokers opened up that discussion by presenting a world in which there were literally 3 Jokers, it created a space for another story to essentially close that box because people kept asking the question, and now the question had more of a firm basis than it had before. So this story is answering and dealing with that while allowing it to be acknowledged but also closed. The concept's there, it can stand if you want it to, but at the same time we can push it more back and it has a more solid answer in the footing of the canon as it stands. Now this of course places the 3 Jokers outside of continuity. As while the concept of the 3 Jokers is addressed, some things that happen there don't work with this explanation inside Zdarsky's run, like all 3 Jokers being in the same room at the same time. Although I guess you could explain that as they were a hallucination. But some of the characters did encounter the Jokers at the same time. But then you could argue, were those some of the people who had been taken over? They weren't actually the Joker. There were ways you could explain that if you wanted to. There's also the fact that these Jokers have different persona names. games. The thing that cements that the most as being outside of continuity is the fact that they're actively trying to move away from it. And in this story, it doesn't really reference those events so much. It just references the concept of three personas, but doesn't go into the details of what happens specifically in that story, which is one of the ways you can kind of start to push something into the background. And this does answer the question whether one decides to view that story as in continuity or not, as Three Jokers did start from the mainline canon, from New 52, and it flowed from there to Rebirth and eventually post-Dark Crisis. Now, of course, things can change, but for now, that puts an answer out there. The chair didn't lie.
But it isn't very specific. It's like a genie, I guess. Gotta ask the question the right way.
Not that everyone cares for this explanation. Some never cared for this idea from the outset at all. Others don't enjoy this, as for some it feels like a reset or a cop-out. Or some just don't enjoy this whole Batman and Joker trained by the same person because they're the most important people in the universe. The two of you are the most dangerous men on the planet. Everyone lives because you simply haven't decided to kill them. This, while it's trying to make the relationship more important, simultaneously in some ways undermines it, because it's taking the more poetic nature that's inherent to their relationship and introducing a manufactured element to it, inside of canon itself. On the whole, this idea of three Jokers being three personalities could still have come to pass without this more Machiavellian over-the-top framework, as the bones for such an explanation had already come to be part of the Joker's character, just naturally over time. But for others, this is a satisfactory conclusion to the Three Jokers plotline for now, or rather an explanation. Or they may enjoy the new layers. What do you think? Is this where you thought the story of the Three Jokers would end up? Do you like it? Dislike it? Did you like the concept in the first place? Do you like this new one? No more Joker, please stop? Had you forgotten it even happened? Your thoughts, I want to hear them all. Put them down below. And while you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notifications so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.